Willkommen bei einer neuen Episode von Markenkraft. Für alle, die von Marken fasziniert und für ihr Wohlergehen verantwortlich sind. Mein Name ist Olaf Hartmann und ich spreche heute über ein Thema, das mich seit 20 Jahren fasziniert und mittlerweile täglich beschäftigt. Multisensorisches Marketing. Wenn ich gefragt werde, sag mal, was ist denn das eigentlich? Dann sage ich gerne, multisensorisches Marketing ist erfolgreiches Marketing. Denn ganz ehrlich, wir haben gar keine andere Wahl. Wenn wir Markenbotschaften in die Köpfe und Herzen bringen wollen, müssen diese sinnlich erfahrbar werden. Denn Kunden weigern sich nach wie vor hartnäckig, unsere tollen Strategiepapiere zu lesen. Sie wollen erleben, was wir versprechen. Dabei gilt zu beachten, was Marshall McLuhan schon so treffend auf den Punkt brachte: The medium is the message. Also im Kanal, über den mich eine Botschaft erreicht, sind automatisch Bedeutungen eingebacken. Und es werden Motive aktiviert, welche die Verarbeitung meiner Botschaft färben. Kontakt ist also nicht gleich Kontakt. Sonst würde es egal sein, ob ich meine Zielgruppe an der Autobahntoilette erreiche oder in der Champagnerbar im Adlon. Und so macht es auch einen Unterschied, ob ich eine Information sehe oder dabei höre oder sogar noch berühren kann. Doch über viele Jahre war die Marketing-Kommunikationsbranche nur von der Optik fasziniert und getrieben. Und das ist auch sinnvoll, denn wir sind primär Sehtiere und verarbeiten über den Sehsinn auch die meisten Informationen. Doch wenn wir Markenkommunikation als Lernprozess begreifen, dann macht diese Übergewichtung des Sehsinns keinen Sinn mehr. Schon Pestalozzi hat das vor über 200 Jahren erkannt, als er die optimale Voraussetzung für Geistesentwicklung formulierte, mit Kopf, Herz und Hand. Und Hand stand dabei für ganzheitliche körperliche Erfahrung. Wir sind und bleiben, trotz Digitalisierung, multisensorische Wesen. Und wenn wir es schaffen, unser Markenversprechen über mehr als einen Sinn zu kodieren, dann kommen wir in den Genuss der sogenannten multisensorischen Verstärkung. Bildgebende Verfahren zeigen, dass mit jedem zusätzlichen Sinn unser Gehirn um den Faktor 10, also 1000% stärker aktiviert wird. Und das hat natürlich Auswirkungen auf die Art, wie wir Informationen wahrnehmen, wie wir sie abspeichern und auch, ob wir sie glauben. Doch wenige Firmen setzen diese Erkenntnis bisher konsequent um, obwohl sie nach Watzlawick eigentlich gar keine Wahl haben, denn man kann nicht kommunizieren und genauso sendet jedes Unternehmen permanent sensorische Signale. Und die Frage ist nur, ob diese bewusst gesteuert werden und konsequent auf das Unternehmensziel oder die Markenversprechen einzahlen. Weil wir in einer optisch auch immer stärker überreizten Gesellschaft leben, werden diese distinktiven sensorischen Codes für die Entwicklung von Markenkraft in Zukunft immer wichtiger. Studien zeigen, dass Marken, denen es gelingt, ihre Identität systematisch über den Sehsinn hinaus zu entwickeln, die doppelte Kundenloyalität und deutlich höhere Preisbereitschaft genießen als eindimensional kodierte Konkurrenten. Deshalb investieren Unternehmen wie Mastercard seit Jahren in die Ausbildung einer multisensorischen Markenidentität. Mit Erfolg, wie man an der beeindruckenden Entwicklung des von Interbrand bestimmten Markenwerts von Mastercard von 3 auf 13 Milliarden US-Dollar ablesen kann. Für sein kürzlich gelaunchtes Soundbranding hat Mastercard weltweit viele Preise abgeräumt. Und deshalb starten wir unsere Reihe über sensorisches Marketing mit einem der Architekten dieses Mastercard-Markenklangs. Mein Gast ist Uli Reese. Er ist Miteigentümer der Agentur AMP und Uli hat praktisch jeden Preis, den es für Musik oder Klang zu gewinnen gibt, schon einmal gewonnen. Von ADC-Nägeln über Goldene Löwen bis hin zu Emmys und sogar einen Studenten-Oscar. Er ist einer der Vordenker der Audiobranche, hat maßgeblich dazu beigetragen, dass Soundbranding heute von vielen großen Marken genutzt wird. Und in den letzten 10 Jahren widmete er sich einem besonderen Projekt. In der Buchreihe 101 Great Minds interviewt er CMOs auf der ganzen Welt und diskutiert mit ihnen über Musik, Marken und Verhalten. Er hat 1983 seine Heimatstadt Stuttgart verlassen und in Los Angeles studiert, um Dirigent und Komponist zu werden. Er arbeitete dann am Anfang seiner Karriere an Serien wie Star Trek und den Disney DuckTales und gewann 1994 diesen erwähnten Studenten-Oscar mit dem Film Outside. Da er seit über 30 Jahren in seinem Beruf nur Englisch spricht, werden wir diese Markenkraft-Episode in Englisch führen. Welcome, Uli. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
To start out and to warm up, I'd like to ask you a quick fire round of questions. You decide if you feel like exploring them any deeper.
Sure.
Book or Facebook?
Book.
Berlin or LA?
Berlin or?
LA.
LA.
LA. Your heart is still in LA. Do you live in LA at the moment?
No, but this was kind of where I spent my 20s, and that's very forming. And I, for some reason, there was a place that most felt home to me during my life, I have to say.
Yeah. So you still have that warm feeling when you return.
Very much so. Still a lot of friends there, and I like to go to CES at the beginning of the year in Las Vegas, the biggest tech show in the world, and I have a good friend, and we always he picks me up towards the end of CES, and then we take a trip around San Francisco, Death Valley, and then eventually ending up in Los Angeles, and so I always look forward to that, very much so.
Oh, trip down memory lane for you, I'm sure. Porsche or Tesla?
Porsche.
You work for Porsche as well, huh?
Yep.
So it's a little bit tainted from the professional experience, but I love Porsche as well. A USP or purpose?
USP.
Like in the show, 80%, 90% say USP. Very few say purpose.
Interesting. Purpose is more the political correct answer, I think. Mm-hmm. We should be about, but I'm not about that. So it's USP.
Yeah, and the question is also like purpose can be a USP, but doesn't have to be a USP. Yeah, and if it's well connected, differentiation or distinctiveness.
Distinctiveness. Very much so.
Whereas there were books written which were called "Differentiate or Die." So I guess the distinctive brands, they have survived. What was the first job you had that was paid?
First job was cleaning tables at McDonald's in Stuttgart at the Rote Bühlplatz.
Ooh, yeah. All right. In the 80s. So that was a very early McDonald's then.
Yeah. It was one of the first McDonald's. And then shortly after that, I did a entrance exam at the Skischule Schwaben. It's a skiing and tennis school, Swabian. It's a southern German. And so I became a ski and tennis instructor when I was 15. So wow. And eventually I would generate money through that.
Right. So you were very much into sports, huh?
Yeah, very much so.
So that helped in the States, I'm sure.
Which got me my first job at Star Trek Next Generation was sports. It was not music.
Really?
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, this is going to take a minute, but I need to get some reference. I went to study composition and conducting at Grove in Los Angeles in 1983, and got a full scholarship for the next year, and it was specialized on film. And so we had a guest from the industry from on Saturdays, kind of from 10 to 12, and one of those guests was Ron Jones. And
who's Ron Jones? For the
Ron
people that don't
Jones
know?
At the time was he did 3 TV shows. One was Star Trek: The Next Generation, the follow-up from Raumschiff Enterprise in German, Captain Kirk and so on. He did Disney DuckTales, and he did the Superman animated series. And it was for Warner, Disney, and Paramount. So he worked for 3 different studios. He had about 50 composers working for him. And so that's Ron Jones. And what was interesting was when his lecture was over, I took his bags with all the scores in it. Said, "Mr. Jones, may I take these to the car for you, sir?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." And so I just thought I have him until he reaches the car and just like talked like a 19-year-old would talk about music. And just stopped and he said, look, I don't want to hear about your music. I'm not interested. You go into the best school in the country. I went to the same school. The entrance exam is pretty tough. You passed, so you're probably really good at what you do. Let's just keep it at that, okay? And I thought, oh, shit. And he said, now you're German, right? So you have a couple good philosophers, composers, writers. Tell me about that. Tell me about something else than music. And I said, you know what? I was ranked in Germany, in Baden-Württemberg, when I was 16. And that's still an accomplishment.
Ranked
I was like
tennis.
55 in Baden-Württemberg in the ranking. So I played
in tennis.
In tennis. Sorry to say in tennis. And so I played a tournament, and a 12-year-old played in the range of 16 to 18. And I was 17, he was 12, and I lost 6-4, 6-3. And I thought about my future, and I thought, okay, I'm getting my ass handed to me by a 12-year-old. I should probably not try to become a pro. 5 years later, this boy would be the youngest Wimbledon winner ever in history, and his name was Boris Becker. and so this is basically why I did music. And he said, Now we're talking. And he said, can you be at my house? Would you play tennis with me? Just once. And I said, of course. Can I go to a Star Trek session? He said, here's the deal. If you're really that good, be 7:00 sharp. Don't be early. Don't be late. At this address tomorrow. This is my house, and we'll play tennis. If you're really as good as you say you are, you get to go to a Star Trek session at Paramount. And so I waited in front of the door. It was like I was a little early, and then on the clock, 7:00. And we played tennis, and it was 6-love, 6-love. It was over very quickly. And he also said, no mercy. If you fake it, I will know right away. So and so eventually this was my first job coming from school, because eventually he offered me a job. He said, I'm going to start you at $2,000 a month. You have to play tennis 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 7 to 9. And then the rest is, the guys will help you getting going. But you'll be starting orchestrating first on Star Trek Next Generation. And do you want that or not?
Wow. So what's the lesson here? It's like, never think anything is wasted in your life. It comes in handy at unusual moments.
It never goes, don't make plans,
Right.
If you see the opportunity, be bold, just walk in, with no fear, and I was the one who took his cases.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not well received by my colleagues in class. They looked at me and said, "You brown noser." Yeah. They went at it. And I said, I don't care. I just feel this is right. And to be really honest with you, that was my career. And Ron Jones, he said, I talked to the president of the school. You know what he said about you? Uli is not our most talented student. But he's always on time. He's really good craftsman. He has low ego. And he said, that's exactly what I need. I don't want a rock star. I want somebody who works in the team, who's good at craft, good at, and so that was my start.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, I think we can finish this podcast now as this is a rich story, which will give a lot of inspiration to people. It's not about always having the best talent, but it's also what I take from this is like you got to create surface for luck to hit you. Yeah, take initiative, create surface, and then luck has the chance to hit you. So that's how you got Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta be out there. You gotta be visible, and that is the number one. It's and maybe one thing to become really successful in what I did all my life in supplying music for communication, for television, it's not about the Mozarts or the Beethovens. That's not what's being asked. What's being asked is to be on time, to always deliver, and to be a good craftsman. The top guys in Hollywood are not Beethovens. They're guys that are highly stress resistant. They can work in teams and deal with committees, and they get successful. So just thought I'd add that.
Yeah, excellent. And then you got started in film music and television productions. And how did you get into the sound branding industry? Because I'm sure we can spend an hour just talking about that time, but let's hone in on what our listeners are interested in, like the branding environment and the sound branding environment. So how did that happen?
The sound branding is a very simple story. Because of my midlife crisis. I had a midlife crisis when I was 40, on the dot, really, because I spent 10 years in Los Angeles and then 10 years in Frankfurt. I've done over 280 television commercials. I've worked as a professor at a film school. I did a lot of consulting for Snap, maybe from the 80s. And when I was 40, I just hit a wall, and I just said, I worked too much in my life. I worked the last 20 years straight. I usually would fall asleep in the studio, or I said, I want to go away for 3-4 months and just try to look at life from a different perspective. And I went to Australia and for a longer stint, and thought I was never allowed to be creative, because doing Star Trek is like wallpaper, literally. It is. There's nothing creative on writing music for Star Trek Next Generation or DuckTales or whatever, because it's very clear. The blueprint is very, very clear of what you can do, what you cannot do. It's the first few is a heart attack, and then it's painting by numbers. But what was interesting was I eventually decided to put my catalog up for sale, which was quite my publishing catalog. I never sold my publishing, and I put everything up for sale, and I got 5 offers from the big 5, and I took one and said, but guys, I'm not going to do commercials or film music. And they looked at the last 5 years of income and said, they said, we don't care, Uli. You're going to be successful either, no matter what. And I said, I'm just going to write songs in Nashville, Tennessee. And they said, we don't care. And I moved to Nashville, took the money, bought a nice house near Music Row, and started writing songs. Wow. And I'm very prolific, and wrote a lot of songs. And because I was a big signing, I was able to write with the absolute elite in Nashville, with the absolute.
So you were writing songs for
singers,
writing songs for different artists.
Different artists. Nashville is the number 1 songwriting capital in the world. It's not just country. It's a lot of other songs. And so I realized after about 3 years that I really suck at songwriting. I'm just not good.
Everybody wanted you, bought the whole, but you really suck. Interesting.
I really suck. Eventually, there's this rule in Nashville: if you write 3 ways, it gets divided by 3. No matter what you did. If you wrote 1 word, it's divided by 3. And I eventually would say, take me off the copyright, because I feel like a fraud. And I eventually stopped, and I just said,
just for understanding, like, what did you mean, like, by divide by 3?
Well, if there are 4 guys in the room, to write a song together,
right,
and one of them just cooks coffee, the copyright of the song gets divided by the people in the room, no matter who did what. There's no such thing as, oh, I wrote 2 words, you wrote 20, and I supplied the melody. Therefore, that's the rule in Nashville. But I was always booked into these major songwriting sessions with like just guys that had so many number ones and so on and so forth. And I felt I could not contribute. And I was honest enough. I just, at a certain point, I just said, that's it. It was nice for 3 years, but I'm also too young for that. I'm too young to retire at I was 43, 44. And then I met my business partner, Steve Keller, from my business I had before AMP. And he turned me on to sound branding, to sonic branding. And it was ideal for me because I have a geek side in me too. I love science and numbers. On the other side, there was music, there was branding, there were a lot of disciplines around this that really it was a turn on, to be honest. And there was and I looked at that and I was just absolutely fascinated because it would connect all of these things. And I said, let me try to sell this in Germany. And I would just take trips from Nashville to Germany. And we very quickly, I remember our first 2 clients were Ehrmann, German company.
Ehrmann, the
Ehrmann,
yogurt company.
Yogurt, the portfolio, the holding company, and Rittersport. Those were the 2 first clients, and they were great cases. Was wonderful, and that's how I got to sonic branding.
That's really interesting. So you didn't feel that it was a step down from fine arts or writing music. It was suddenly that it clicked and like that it combined the competence. Yeah, it was a combination of competence. That's very interesting. And what was the state of the industry back then? Like you said that it was further advanced, like it usually is probably in the States. So in Germany, when you knocked on doors and said, "Hey, I'm the sound branding expert," how did people react?
It was tough. It changed so much, but then it was still, oh, you mean Intel, and you mean McDonald's? You mean? I said no. That's not what I mean. That's from 1994. I mean, this was 2009 was the founding of the Sonic Branding Academy in Hamburg. So I went to the first seminar there, and it was like lots of the pioneers that already did this for 10 years. And I felt like a total green kid, and I was just fascinated. But those first cases, they were really difficult because there was so little knowledge about this, in terms of doing what we call DNA-based holistic sonic branding today. Anyways, it was tough, but it was a start. So 2009, I found it.
2009. That's when we started the Multisense Forum. Like 2010 was the first time that we were in the Red Dot Museum, and multisensory marketing was just really in its infancy. Nobody really knew what we were talking about. Yeah. So I have a vivid imagination how people reacted to sound branding beyond a jingle or something. And what was the moment when you realized that you somehow were on the right track? Was there something that happened where you said like, okay, yeah, this is it. I found my...
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if I would call this right track. I mean, we got really lucky out of we hit it right out of the park when we started, and it was good. And we had a brilliant 2009. I founded the GmbH. What's interesting is our competitor AMP, which I now co-own, was founded a few weeks after us in 2009. It's it's almost the same founding date. And we went on and it was a great time, but it declined more and more and more. And eventually we lost 3 pitches in a row. One was Hilton globally, even though the headquarter of IB2 was Nashville, Tennessee, which is like 4 hours from Memphis, the headquarter of Hilton. We still lost against AMP. We then went on to do Unicredit, the pitch. Again, we lost to AMP. And eventually, I just knew there were guys that were just better. Period.
And what were they doing better? What was the? I would like to also, because I'm sure we have lots of listeners that have not really spent much thought on sound branding. Could we just make a frame of reference why sound branding suddenly at least created a market, or why suddenly it became relevant, or not suddenly, by why it was always relevant, but people realized it more strongly. So what happened there?
Well, let's fast forward. Just a little bit. Is we live in the golden age of audio. Since 3, 4, 5 years ago, from podcasts, screenless ecosystems, all this stuff, becomes a sonic audio consumer touch point. And why sonic branding became so dominant and now is like it's imploding, because brands had the sonic logo, which was introduced by Intel in 1994. A sonic logo is a relic from the past. And in today's experience-driven customer journey, you're not going to get very far with a 3-second static sonic logo, like McDonald's or T-Mobile, or in Deutschland Telekom. And so what happened was, brands all of a sudden needed something different to show up in these touch points. And this is where sonic branding came into, becoming very, very important, especially we call it DNA based, where it has a lot of assets it's almost like a visual identity is not a visual logo. Right. And a sonic identity is not a sonic logo. It's a lot more. And so this is some of the part. Let me take one step further. And I just talked in Dubai at a tech conference about this. One of the central issues for CMOs today worldwide is, how am I going to make my brand sonically future-proof? I understand what got us here will not get us into the next decades. And we need to adapt. And so this amazing opportunity of, so many new channels. They can reach consumer because they consume content on wearables, on screenless ecosystems, on podcasts, on all of this. They consume content, and as a marketeer, I can reach them on all these channels, but I also have to show up no matter what sonically on these touch points.
Right.
So what am I going to do? We all know, okay, sonic logo, thank you, is not going to work. Yeah. What's it going to be? And this is where this implosion comes from, where they just see, half of the people in 101 Great Minds of the CMOs have sonic logos, and they all agree.
Right. That's very interesting. Is like you went on a quest a little bit, like from what I can see through the history, and we've been in touch through one of the sound branding academy conferences.
Right.
And you went on a quest basically to put sound branding on the map, to put it really in a prominent place. And the one thing that you described was like the technological development. Yeah. And but then the other thing that I wanted to talk about later, but which we can touch now, then you created this project, this 101 Great Minds. And what were the thoughts behind it, and how did you go about that? And where are you with this today?
Where I am is I'm I'm about 60 interviews into book 3. And this started in 2009. I was just curious, and I had so many questions. And I looked at so many times into the decision-making process around music and brand communication. That was kind of the first elephant I saw on the table. And I saw the agency side is extremely unhappy. They're jeopardizing client relationships with this. And the client side is extremely unhappy. And this was not my opinion. It was interesting, we have every global chief creative officer of all holding agencies, BBDO, DDB, whatever. We have every founder of the big agencies, from David Droga to Sir John Hegarty, everybody. And they all agreed, Uli, we need to talk about the elephant on the table, because the way we make decisions here, we don't like. We have to get better at this. And this is the success behind everything, because if you're not doing something that really adds value to the community, that community of global CCOs and founders is very, very small. I'm just saying, if you're full of, you know what I mean, it's a turning door, and you're out as quickly as you were in.
Okay, so that's basically like you were picking these CMOs and making basically sound branding relevant to them by discussing what's the value that it adds to the overall to the business case in the end, because nobody does sound branding just because it sounds nice or they like music. And I had one quote which I wrote down here. Andrew Barraclough, he said, the numbers back up how important sound is for the brand. What did he mean by that? And how do you make it measurable, what the contribution of sound is to the business case, but also for the branding power that we're talking about?
Yeah, obviously, big brands are not really interested in having their numbers published to prove an ROI case. But ROI is one of the central topics about this, because it's not exactly cheap what we do as a sector, and so eventually,
so as a client, how much money, to give a little bit of perspective, how much money would you need for a global brand to develop sound branding?
Starts at 7 digits.
That's a considerable amount of money, yeah.
Yeah, and we're talking global. We're talking big global brands. It also, that's eventually a CMO. All CMOs believe in that they need this, but usually there's no budget for this, because for visual design or classic agency, there's a budget returning every year. You discuss the budget and then say, okay, we have this much, let's do. CMOs today are acting like investors, and they look at the pie and mainly data driven and say, well, what worked last year? What's going to be the future, and so on. So that's where they make decisions. But the point is, once they really understand, okay, we need this, we cannot sustain like this we need, they need to go to their CEO and say, I want this much money. And the CEO, the only question usually comes back is explain to me how that money comes back to us.
What's in it for me?
Why should I spend this amount of money for something I can't even touch? Okay, and something I don't understand. And so, of course, the ROI case is extremely important. And I can't really talk about it because we don't, those numbers cannot.
But not really in the number sense, but in the general sense. Like if you think about the pitch that we just talked about here, Andrew Barraclough, for those who don't know him, he's the head of a pharmaceutical company. So that doesn't where you think about soft drinks or others, you would immediately feel, okay, yeah, they get a lot of value out of sound branding and so on. But that a pharmaceutical company says that the numbers add up for them. But if you would give a pitch like to me, I'm the CEO of a global brand, and I'm very skeptical about sound branding. What would you tell me? Because like if I look at 12 month numbers, can I really see an effect after 12 months about sound branding?
Well, first I would tell you why you need sound branding. And the reason, first of all, the reason you need sound branding is because you're in the trust building business. No matter what you do, if you sell diapers or insurance or car tires, you're always first and foremost trust building business. No trust, no sale. This is why you need sonic branding. Now, let me get that bridge from trust to sonic branding. Trust, we all agree, can only be earned. It cannot be bought. All right. Also, trust is earned in drops. Step by step by step. If I have consistent actions towards you, you eventually will trust me. It is lost in buckets. One lie, and you can forgive that lie, but we can never go back to the innocent trust we had in the beginning, right? So, the sense of hearing is the first sense we experience trust with. All the other senses are not developed in our mother's womb. So what's really important is when we reach consumers, it needs to have consistency. And the way we communicate sonically with our consumers is anything else but consistent. We sound different every time. And then on top of that, a consumer today looks at a brand, even at banks or it doesn't really matter. They look at brands like human beings. They want to get to know you, not the licensed cool version of you, in you standing next to the cool kid and license the big track. The days of, hi, I'm Pepsi, here's Michael Jackson and Britney Spears, therefore I'm cool. Those days are completely over. So consumers want to get to know you, and also like don't share your Spotify playlist and appear cool with that because they smell it a mile against the wind. So sonic is really important to get consistent. And this is why sonic branding now, because brands have no choice but to show up on all of these new sonic consumer touch points, that they get it straight, that they know what they're doing. This is a big part behind this.
Right. And do you see like a sound, the importance of sound of creating trust? It's like they say in speakers training, like people will forget what you say,
Exactly.
but they never will forget how they felt while you said it.
Exactly.
And there's a small timbre in the voice that can immediately create trust, or also tell people, he's not really serious about what he's saying. And what you're saying is that the brand also, like a person, has a timbre, like a certain sound to it, and people pick up on these signals and understand immediately if this is genuine and authentic, or if it's just something, we try to be cool, so we hire Michael Jackson for a while to look cool.
Exactly. So I mean, this is basically what it's all based on. Mm-hmm. The whole movement that's taking place right now, mm-hmm. And the amazing development behind this, let me share like kind of the themes that are going through hundreds of CMO interviews. Mm-hmm. And one of the themes is we understand that standing next to I call it the cool kid syndrome. And the cool kid syndrome is standing next to the cool kid and appearing cool. And this can only happen as long as you rent the cool kid from a record company. And you can never own it. So
but you still pay top dollar?
You still pay top dollar. And those are a lot of the decision-making processes around music Very simple. You come in as an agency, try to sell a campaign, right? And music is like, either don't you think it's great? That's a tough sell. Or we got Coldplay for 2.2 million. How's that? Now, the creatives on the agency side say, we hate this process because it's jeopardizing client relationships, because the client looks at us saying, guys, if we don't exactly hit the magic right away, the clients say, I thought you could make this work. I thought this is your job to find the right music. Mm-hmm. Apparently you cannot.
And sound is such a personal thing also. And when you listen to Coldplay, you basically, that's an established brand that immediately creates emotions in the people. And maybe you have a positive relationship with Coldplay because you met your wife while at the party Coldplay was playing. And now this emotion is in competition with something that is created new, didn't leave any patterns yet. So my question in that direction would be, how do you break that perception? What are the principles that you teach your clients to understand if the sound branding that you suggest is the right way to go?
Well, this is really tough, I have to say, because what we've learned, and this is a business model, is the cool kid model. Mm-hmm. Standing next to the cool kid, hoping the fairy dust rubs off on you, praying for a credibility transfer. I just want to say, on choosing a track on the CMO side, I have so many examples, CMOs saying, Uli, I tell you exactly what's happening. When I ask them about decision-making processes around music for their commercials, they say, they send me home over the weekend with 3 choices. First of all, I'm not a music expert. Why should I choose that? Second, I go to my 12-year-old daughter. She makes the decision. And I come back Monday morning and say, guys, guess what? It's going to be track number 2. Now, this is the decision-making process around music in branded communication. Music that is on airtime that we buy for hundreds of millions of euro every year. Mm-hmm. Hundreds of millions. Mm-hmm. I do not exaggerate at all. Hundreds of millions. And this is the decision-making process on the music track on that. Again, it's audio-visual communication. We treat it as visual communication.
Right. And how do you break that? And how do you break that? I mean, you've managed to do that. For example,
well, it's very simple. Is that, don't get me wrong, this is important for me. I'm not against licensing music when it supports an authentic narrative of a spot. I'll give you an example. Maybe you remember Anthony did this, was the agency on this spot. It was with Peter Fonda, was a Super Bowl spot. And
for Mercedes.
For Mercedes SL. And it was called Blocked In, and they licensed Born to Be Wild, and that's 7 digits, absolutely, and I would say absolutely check, totally authentic narrative, Peter Fonda, Born to Be Wild, check, wonderful. Mm-hmm. When you spend 8 million euro a year on music just for car fares, music on 3,500 uploads a year on your global YouTube channel. This is music that is not building sonic brand capital. Mm. This is music that has no value whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Because basically where it comes from is like, I'm on the IAA in Munich, and the question was, well, does hip hop fit to Mercedes this year, or classic, or this or that? That's not enough. If I close my eyes, I need to know whether I'm at Audi or Mercedes or BMW. Mm-hmm. If I don't, with closed eyes, we have a huge problem for something we're spending money on like crazy, something that costs in decision-making processes on agency side, tremendous money.
So
on Mercedes side, it's like complete. Yeah. It's ludicrous.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the same principle applies for visual communication. If the advertisement is not connected with the brand, if I cover the logo, then I have a coding problem. So the codes must be connected to the brand. And what you're saying is like that's never going to happen with famous songs. And
unsustainable.
And you recently won many prizes for MasterCard. So I would like to talk about that case as an exemplary case. Why is it so great? Why did it win so many awards? And why do you think, I hope you personally think that it's a great piece of work. Sometimes sometimes awards happen also for things that people are not 100% proud of and think something else should have deserved it. But I think in this case, you are proud of the work as far as I understand.
Yes, we are. Of course we are. One of the reasons was I've been asked so many times, Uli, what's the best practice case in sonic branding? Mm-hmm. Tell me a brand. I said, there is none. Well, what do you mean? I said, the last thing you want to do is Intel, McDonald's, or telecom. Mm-hmm. That's about the last thing you want to do. Or Audi, or. And I'm not making enemies here. This is what I say in big meetings.
But people listening to us, just to clear that up, people listening to us, they would exactly think of these examples that they are great examples. So why are they not great examples? Could you make that?
Because first of all, what they all have in common, they're around 25 years old. Mm-hmm. They are famous because they've been used. The penetration was extremely high in the discipline in using that. But they have been, I always say they have no mother, meaning they have been developed with, there was the computer animation for Intel, and Walter Werzowa had it over the weekend, and he did a couple of versions, and one of them was it.
Mm-hmm. And then it was about penetration, and it became known worldwide, which is a value in itself also. So like, mediocre.
But here come Karen Walker. Karen Walker is the global CMO of Intel. Mm-hmm. And when you talk to her, she says, Uli, I wish people would ask me what a mixed blessing it is to have a logo like Intel. And I asked her, well, why did you use it 87% less last year? And she said, because it doesn't work, very clearly. And this is what people need to understand, that worked when our communication with our consumer was a 30-second spot 25 years ago, 1994. And at the end of that was a logo, dush, like that. Mm-hmm. That was the communication. Mm-hmm. And you either reached that consumer or you did not. That was your audio-visual communication. Mm-hmm. Fast forward 25 years. And for that communication, the 3-second logo was perfect. Dynamite, check, wonderful. Fast forward, 150 CMOs say, no, absolutely not, Uli. This is not working. This is not working. We cannot show up on, at these sonic consumer touch points with a 3-second logo. How are we going to do that? Because we need a lot more flexibility. And so these logos have the problem, they cannot be facelifted, we call it. It's like a 911 going through 7 versions, and it gets a facelift. To put a logo, and I had this discussion with Hans-Christian Schwingen over and over. And I said, you're not going to get it facelifted.
The telecom
it's not going to
logo.
happen. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. The telecom logo. Yeah, mm-hmm. Sure. I'm sorry. He was the chief brand officer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hans-Christian Schwingen and Amir Kassai both helped me at CanLine 2016 to present the book. And the reason behind that was they wanted to support what I am doing, because I wanted to address this and say, guys, we need to get better at this. We need to have different, we need to ask different questions. We need to ask a lot different questions.
Can I just to clarify
Absolutely.
that? So basically, in the old days when the media contact was 30 seconds and it needed like a code in the end that even if people didn't watch the television while the spot was running, in the end they understood this was Intel. So it created some memory structures. Now the touch points, as I understood you now, are different, and they are faster. So 3 seconds is too much. It doesn't fit through the door anymore. So we need smaller codes, like very distinct small codes that are immediately recognized and more useful in their versatility. And there we come maybe to MasterCard. For example, you created the feedback sound when a payment is done with a MasterCard. Yeah, and I read about it, and I'm in touch with Raja, like through LinkedIn, and I'm really thrilled how much he pushes multisensory marketing, and he says this is the future, and I will create a multisensory brand for MasterCard. He creates like even taste, which was amazing, like macarons made from in the two colors of the MasterCard logo, or the perfume that they're doing, or now a more like a touch point which is going to have more surface, is like even a special shape MasterCard, so people can touch it in the dark and they recognize it haptically, and it's connected with the brand. So
it's all 5 senses.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit about that process. How much you can tell? I mean,
I'd be glad to. I mean, first of all, big kudos to Raja, because we had our first exchange in 2017 at Cannes Lions, and we talked about sonic branding, and I said, let me send you something the way we see your brand, and it's called a sonic CV. It's almost like if MasterCard would apply for a job. And it starts with, hi, my name is MasterCard. Let me take you through a usual day, sonic day, globally, how this looks. I use this kind of music. I use this much stock music, this much composed, this much licensed, and so on, so on, so forth. And then we have an algorithm. We don't even need data inside MasterCard to tell MasterCard exactly, here's your isolated spend on music below the line and above the line. And, the future will be very, very much different from a sonic logo. And very quickly after that, he called me and said, so what does that mean for us? And I said, it means that if you go down the route as, for a sonic logo, it's not going to work. And he said, can we talk? I said, yeah, let's book a 2-hour session at your headquarters. And it was basically, we laid it all out and said, MasterCard needs to be sonically identifiable at every audio consumer touch point below 2 seconds. What does that mean? That means I can blindly go into YouTube, Insta, TikTok, wherever I want, and just dial in and say, this can only be MasterCard. This is what it has to be. This has nothing to do with the sonic logo. And I said, if I am at one of your pop-up restaurants, a priceless experience in New York, and
just
have a soundscape.
For the listeners who don't know, that's an amazing action that MasterCard took. They took their priceless campaign and created a space for it, like
pop-up restaurants.
Yeah, some things are priceless. For everything else is MasterCard. So they let people dine in very, very special locations, which only popped up like for a week or 2 weeks.
Exactly.
So a multi-sensory experience, which they obviously share on social media, that they talk about, and all this is basically an immersive world, like from the sound,
totally,
like we just heard, to what they experience, taste, everything. So
totally. Yeah. Mm-hmm. My Mac will go to sleep in just a second. Hold on. I need to get
the technical obstacls of
there we go.
Of podcasts. Okay.
What's really interesting, and again, I have been so close to this for 4 or 5 years now. Yeah. That it's hard for me to
That's right. Really that's I'm trying to add the knowledge that people might not have. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Dial me in. Mm-hmm. So this was something very critical, where I said, you need to let go of the usual thinking about this. This needs to be the only best practice case I know in the world is James Bond. Mm-hmm. Why? James Bond is cutting edge zeitgeist, 7 decades, from Shirley Bassey, 64, to Billie Eilish. What they all have in common, and I'm just talking about the songs, Adele, Garbage, Duran Duran, they're all number one in the charts in their decade. That's what they all have in common. What they also have all in common, Adele sounds completely Adele. She doesn't bend a bit, but also sounds James Bond. Now, how is that possible? Mm-hmm. Duran Duran stays completely authentic Duran Duran, but sounds James Bond. How is that possible? Because James Bond has a multi-asset strategy. It has about 10 different assets, sonic assets, like chord structures, like riffs, like, branded instruments, etc., that make up the entire brand James Bond. What's also interesting is you look through 25 film scores of an hour plus, and you can blindly go into, and in 2 seconds, from the 60s, James Bond. I go at 2000, James Bond.
I totally agree. We just had this in our kitchen where we're listening to the radio, and we had a song on, and we said, "That's James Bond."
Yeah. And how is that? And I said, this is the future. The old world is, let's take Billie Eilish and ram it on top of our product and hope that there's a credibility transfer. Mm-hmm. That's the old world. Mm-hmm. The cool kid world. Mm-hmm. The new world is, hi, I'm MasterCard. Billy, I like you, let's do a co-creation. I will meet you on eyes level. Very different in terms of authenticity. Mm-hmm. I will co-create something with you, with your producers, and we'll take, here's the sonic toolbox of MasterCard.
Right.
And pick one or two or whatever.
That's good.
And all of a sudden, it becomes a completely different ballgame.
Okay.
And this is the future. And this is where I said to Raja, I will make you completely independent of record companies and publishing companies. Uh-huh. Not because I don't like them. It's not about that. Again, for certain things, I believe in licensing. Go ahead. But I don't believe in the cool kid thing. I think you are cool.
Yeah, so let me summarize what I understood. So basically, you created a DNA, like for any sound that MasterCard is using, that is then put into context. For example, that's one of the challenges. MasterCard is used at a classic concert, at a rock concert, and maybe at an ice cream shop. Yeah. So the sound has to basically adapt to the environment and still needs to be recognized, like you said with James Bond, through the decades, like different zeitgeist and all that, but it still needs to have those elements that people recognize and attach to the brand. And this way it can always stay fresh. It can always take influences also from the outside and still stay true to the core of himself or herself.
Exactly. You keep building sonic brand capital. Mm-hmm. With every impression, recognition, you're paying into a bank. If you use licensed music, it's a bucket with a hole. You can never withdraw money from that bank account in terms of recall. Mm-hmm. And this is the central piece. Now, what's interesting about this is, how does MasterCard sound in Germany? Does America decide how this should sound in Germany? How does it sound in China, right? Indonesia, mm-hmm. India? Mm-hmm. Do we in Germany decide how Indonesia sounds? Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a good idea, to be honest with you. It's not very authentic. Mm-hmm. But that's how brands work, right? It's going to be fine. No, it's not going to be fine. The cultural adaptability to a sonic DNA is critical. it's not only how does MasterCard sound on you, oh, let's do the Christmas deal on the MasterCard sound, right? It's like what everybody does. No. It's not about that. It's like, how does Christmas then sound in China? Do they even have Christmas? And how does it sound it's like all these things. And what's now happening with MasterCard, and this is mind-boggling, is that we implemented this in 185 markets. And again, if you implement something in 185 markets, it doesn't matter who you are. Even if you're Apple or Amazon, if you don't add serious value, you will break. It will break like a branch that is too rigid. You can't just say, we'll do this. No. It doesn't work. Everybody needs to understand, oh my God, this is my life, making my life so much easier. I sleep better at night. And all of a sudden, you have all these new tracks that are composed on the basis of the DNA in China,
and it becomes like a sound ecosystem that is growing. Yeah, but the core, the seed is basically always the same. Can you share a little bit what are the seeds of the? I mean, we're going to link in the show notes to the case so people can listen to it. But can you just share what are typical DNA ingredients of MasterCard?
Basically, different melodies, different harmonies, different structures, different riffs, different branded instruments. A branded instrument is like the guitar sound in James Bond. Dun, 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 dun. It's a special guitar sound. That's a branded instrument. You know what's interesting? When you play this sound with a different melody, there's a study out now that says most of the people say, oh, this is James Bond, even though it's not even the melody. It's because James Bond is almost like a hashtag. It's like Tempo as Papiertaschentücher. They basically hijack the hashtag for that sound, and through history, it'll be, oh, James Bond, of course.
And that is so powerful because, like, I used this in another podcast as an example. Like when H&M did these city light posters in Germany, they started to do the supermodel on white background with a price and the H&M logo. And they did that. They pioneered basically the city lights with this. And then C&A went and said like, oh, we got as much money, we can hire also supermodels, and we do the same thing and put C&A there. And then later they found out that the people that saw the C&A poster, they actually remembered H&M. Because the code was so strongly connected by that time, the visual code, and that is very powerful. So you let other people do advertising for you, or let musicians basically trigger your brand. So
it's amazing.
That is amazing. That is really cool. I have one question, like now from the global brand, like because I know many people listening here are responsible for marketing for medium-sized companies and so on. If you would give like the 3 or 5 key insights how to use sound branding in different scalable versions, like what would you start with? What would you tell one of those hidden champion German companies that own the world market, but they have like several thousand employees, don't have touch points all over, and are not a consumer driven, but maybe a B2B brand? Is sound branding something for them, or is that something, no, that's just for consumer brands?
Well, absolutely, because we're going into multi-sensory no matter what. Branding, and our senses, last time I checked, we have 5.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah.
And again, it's not,
some people speak that there's a 6th sense as well.
Yeah, probably, but let's just stick with 5. And so this is really important because we don't know what the future will hold. And again, the channels where these companies communicate with their possible consumers, and this is exactly the same also for B2B. We just won a huge case with Deloitte, which is a straight B2B case, but it is so important that you show up there consistently and you know what you're doing. It doesn't matter where. and so what's really important, know thyself. Mm-hmm. Understand who you really are. And it's almost like, think of your voice. My voice is unique in 8 billion voices, completely unique. It's because the way my skull is formed, how much weight I have or not. It's like, and you will remember the voice, even if you don't hear it in 20 years. Mm. And this is our strongest phenomenal recall mechanism in our system by far is remembering unison melodies, not sounds. Don't get me wrong, with sound, we're pretty not so smart. We're actually pretty dumb in remembering sound, but in remembering unison melodies, we are phenomenal. We're born Mozarts.
That's like our Gestaltwahrnehmung, yeah? Like the overall, it's unbelievable. That's right.
You listen to something in your puberty, right, when you're 15, then you don't listen to it for 50 years. And I can trigger you with 2 seconds, and guess what? You're 80, you can still sing the whole song.
Okay, so what you're basically saying, in B2B, we're also talking to humans. It's not different. Like, people always think B2B is more rational and all that. So, and in these humans, we need to strike a chord, and we need to be memorable. Otherwise, we have no chance that they will remember us in moments of needs. And I would add to that, from my perspective, also what most people in B2B business, we are talking about long-term decisions, like to change your accountant. It's nothing that you do every week, every month. And even more important becomes the moment when I am in need, that I remember the brand that wants to be at my service. So establishing long-term memory structures by branding even becomes more important in B2B, because it's not an everyday process where the memory structures is reinforced every day at the supermarket register. It's something that is for a long time dormant, basically, the need. And then in the moment of need, I need to think of, for example, Deloitte. So, and there, and what you just said, sound branding can add to that. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much. Okay, the time is flying by. I would like to wrap up a little bit, like what you already mentioned. Look into the future. What do you see coming in the next 10 years? You've spoken to so many CMOs. It's really a very privileged access to the greatest marketing minds out there in the world. And what do you see? What are the driving forces that you see that brands should watch out for?
A few things. I get asked this all the time. Tell me the future, and my answer is always the same: is I have no clue. But when you design something, don't design for an app. They will be gone, I guarantee. Do not design for a smaller or bigger iPhone or whatever phone. They will leave us, okay? In 5-10 years, nobody will remember. Today, an iPhone to me is just a smaller brick. Remember the big phones? And it just got smaller. That's not the point. The point is what goes in here and what goes into our subconscious viscerally, where we make all of our buying decisions. Understanding that we decide below 0.5 seconds whether we are ever completely going to trust somebody or not. Think of an iceberg. You have 1/8 above water. That's explicit transmission. That's 3 to 4 words. That's 40 bits. And we have 7-8 down here. That's 11 million bits a second in implicit transmission. So I have access to 11. This is the bandwidth I can communicate with you going in here. So whatever you do, think of that.
Going in here, people don't see you. Going in here, he's pointing to his ears. Uli is pointing to his ears.
Good. The other point is the next 3 to 5 years have been crunched into 1 year because of COVID. Mm-hmm. Leading up to COVID, audio became already dominant. 10 years ago, if I would have told you, oh, we need a podcast, whatever, you would have told me, dude, are you kidding? Who are you kidding? Today, not so much. So looking at this, what happened in COVID was basically we preempted the entire, 3 to 5 years in evolution into 1 year because we had to. We had no other choice. And all of a sudden, Sonic is about twice as fast as digital in terms of development that we've seen. So when you go into the future, think of decades. Don't think of this, what's it going to do for me next week? Mm-hmm. Or where's my brand lift in the next, quarter? That's not what it's about.
Yeah. And there two last questions is like, we call it the VUCA world, like volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. What is the role, if you go in the helicopter view, of brands in this world? Do they become more important or less important?
Brands?
Brands.
Oh, they will become a lot more important. There are a lot of countries where brands are a lot more trusted than governments. Brands have a huge responsibility. Especially in hard times, I think it's the biggest mistake when brands, reduce their marketing and reduce being out there, because this is when we need them the most. Mm-hmm. And I want brands to not eventually sell me something, but bottom line is, if you don't add severe value to my life, I will just tune the channel and everybody else will do the same. Hmm. And so think about, how can I add value? What can I do for you? What can I add to the stream of life for your life? Hmm. And then eventually you will become what I call a non-brainer,
That's an interesting insight from the neuroscience, that they thought in the past that when you look at brains that process brands, that you would see more activity because there's so much memory stored and meaning and so on. And what they actually found is that the brain is actually doing less. So basically, the brand is helping the brain to relax. And like you just said, a non-brainer. You don't have to think about it. It just reduces the complexity of your life. So that goes in the direction what you just described. It's like the world becomes more complex, and here we have a power that makes our decision-making, our life, less complex. And how great is that? And
maybe one thing I want to land on, and here I want to really call out Roger again for, he really walks his talk. And when he first had the talk with his CEO, and the talk was, I want to take the name MasterCard off the logo. Mm-hmm. That was a tough talk to have. Imagine going to your CEO and saying, you know what, I want to take the written MasterCard off the logo.
And the reason was?
Because you want to become a symbol brand. Future is symbol. And not, I don't want to read stuff. That's ancient. I want to see the symbol done. And then he really walked his talk in sonic, in haptically, mm-hmm. For blind, in smell, in taste, and really on top of everything, where he had this cooperation with Citi. I don't know if you know from having trans community, bi community, etc., to pick your own name, because it's so hard to establish your own name if you change gender. And so he was the first one with Citi together, one of the biggest financial institutions in the world, to say, you can have your own name on our card. And what he does is really, yes, it's business, it's MasterCard, all wonderful, check.
Yeah.
But what he did, especially for sonic branding around the world, is like, it's completely priceless to me.
Absolutely. And you must say there's still a measurable effect Few other brands have gained so much in strength over the time that he worked as a CMO for MasterCard. So we're talking here bottom line results, and he's advocating this very strongly, that marketing has to have an eye level seat at the C level again, because very often it's just seen at the moment as a function. They make things beautiful, but that's not it. They really add value, and I agree completely. He's done an amazing job, and I hope that we're going to have him on the podcast here because he's an exemplary example. So my last question for you: you got the chance to put a screensaver on the computers of all brand managers and CMOs worldwide for 1 month. What does it say?
Whoa. A screensaver.
Or maybe it doesn't say anything, it just sounds. If the question doesn't lead anywhere, it's my fault, so don't worry.
I'd have to think about that, because it's a question too fundamental to just here's the first thing that comes to mind and pick. Maybe I'll
you email it and I put it in the show notes. But before I let you go, a quick fire. Any resource you want to point our listeners to, any book you would recommend, whatever comes to mind. That can be intuitive or books that you have gifted very often. Something that inspired you in your life, that inspires you in your job. Fire away.
Well, really, and I have to pitch AMP at this point, because we are usually hired because of thought leadership. And thought leadership is a few things for us. One is 101 Great Minds. We post Tuesdays and Thursdays, and just read the interviews. It doesn't get any more current than that. This is where it's at out there globally, period. From India to the US to anywhere. We have another one is called Amplify, which is going by sector. We look at tech, sound in insurance, sound in automotive. And then I think that the strongest thing, if you really want to think about sonic branding, is, look at the best audio brand index. And we put that out every year. It's very tough methodology, and we rank the top 100 brands in the world. And it's very, very clear, and it's just an incredible piece. I think every year we put in so much knowledge into that, and thought leadership, and those are kind of the 2-3 things I think add just a lot of value to the discussion. Let's have a better conversation about this. This is what I really want. This is my mission.
Very good. We'll put all that in the show notes for people to find it easily. Ole, that was an amazingly short hour. I feel deeply grateful for your time and your valuable insights, and I wish you the very best with all your future endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Olaf. Thanks for having me.
Und das war eine weitere Episode von Markenkraft. Vielen Dank, dass Sie dabei waren. Wir hoffen, es hat Ihnen genauso viel Freude gemacht wie uns. Wenn ja, empfehlen Sie uns, Ihren Freunden, Ihren Bekannten, Ihren Kollegen und bewerten Sie uns auf iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Soundcloud, egal wo Sie diesen Podcast hören. Share the love for brands. Machen Sie es gut für sich und die Menschen in Ihrem Leben.